Imagine dedicating 20 years of your life to someone, only to walk into a hotel room and find them waiting for you with another man. Not just waiting, but celebrating your downfall. They took your money, your home, your future, and left you with nothing but a one-way ticket out of your own life. But what they didn't realize was that I don't break. I rebuild. And when I strike back, I don't just win, I make sure they lose everything. This is the story of how I turned betrayal into the greatest victory of my life. Grayson Walsh navigated the dense city traffic with practiced ease, though his mind remained far from the road ahead. The rhythmic tapping of his fingers against the steering wheel betrayed his impatience as he tried to shake the lingering stress of the day. At 45, he was at the peak of his career, celebrated for his groundbreaking work in sustainable architecture. Yet the prestige, the recognition, and the long hours spent perfecting his latest project had drained him in ways he hadn't anticipated. As he turned onto his quiet suburban street, the tension in his shoulders eased slightly. The house, a testament to his success, stood illuminated under the soft glow of the porch light. He had built this life brick by brick, yet something about it felt less like a home and more like a structure held together by obligation. Just as he reached for his keys, the front door swung open. Lauren Marshall stepped outside with an energy that felt misplaced. Her bright expression, the way her eyes gleamed a little too intensely, sent an unfamiliar sensation crawling under his skin. She had always been composed, predictable, yet something about her in this moment felt off. The lateness of the hour hadn't crossed her mind, or perhaps she simply chose to ignore it. A warmth in her voice attempted to bridge the growing distance between them, but Grayson barely registered her words. It was the way she lingered, the way she seemed to be waiting for something, that made him pause. Then came the mention of a surprise. A simple invitation to meet her at the Kingsley Hotel the following evening at 7 sharp. Her tone was light, almost playful, yet the insistence in her eyes unsettled him more than he cared to admit. Fatigue clouded his judgment, and without much thought, he agreed. His mind was too consumed with deadlines, designs, and the relentless cycle of work to probe deeper into what lay beneath her unexpected enthusiasm. Inside the house, he moved through the familiar motions, shedding his suit jacket, loosening his tie, stepping into the steaming embrace of a shower. Water cascaded over his skin, but it did little to wash away the questions now forming at the back of his mind. Time had changed them, there was no denying that. The passion that had once burned fiercely between them had faded into something lukewarm, a quiet, unspoken understanding rather than a flame. The long nights spent at the office, the increasing silences over dinner, the way their conversations had become obligatory rather than intimate, it all painted a picture he hadn't wanted to acknowledge. He had believed that time apart was a necessary sacrifice for their future. But what if, instead of strengthening them, it had only hollowed out the foundation of their marriage? By the time he stepped out of the shower, the bedroom was quiet, the bed untouched on one side. Lauren had retreated elsewhere, leaving only the dim glow of a bedside lamp and the suffocating weight of unspoken words. The next evening, Grayson arrived at the Kingsley Hotel precisely at 7. The bouquet of roses in his hand felt like an afterthought, a feeble attempt to rekindle something that may have already burned out. The sleek marble floors, the polished surfaces of the grand lobby, all reflected a world of luxury he had long grown accustomed to. Yet tonight, the opulence felt hollow. A concierge, young and composed, greeted him with a professional nod, offering instructions to a suite on the 19th floor. The tone in his voice, subtle, yet undeniable, hinted at something unspoken. Grayson ignored it, stepping into the elevator, the mechanical hum of its ascent amplifying the unease settling deep in his gut. The suite door opened before he could knock. Lauren stood before him, but it was the presence of another man in the background that made time stretch unbearably thin. The stranger, relaxed and too at ease in a space that should have felt foreign, barely acknowledged Grayson's arrival before offering a knowing smirk. The truth crashed down with a weight that rooted him to the spot. Lauren's expression no longer held the warmth of a wife welcoming her husband. Instead, There was something else, satisfaction, control, a certainty that she held all the cards. She didn't need to say much. The setup spoke for itself. The man, the way he lingered so possessively near her, the way she stood with an air of finality. It was all choreographed to inflict the maximum damage. The envelope hit the floor at his feet before she even bothered to explain. Divorce papers. A transfer of his retirement savings into her account. A one-way ticket to Montreal, as if relocation would be enough to erase the betrayal. The roses slipped from his grasp, petals scattering like remnants of a past that had just been obliterated. The man beside her, Daniel Cruz, she eventually called him, didn't bother masking his amusement. Words were unnecessary. The message had been delivered with brutal efficiency. Grayson had been replaced, discarded, his 20 years of commitment reduced to nothing more than a stepping stone. Rage simmered beneath the surface, but he refused to let it spill over. His hands clenched at his sides, nails digging into his palms as he processed the magnitude of the deception. His silence stretched, thickening the air between them. Lauren expected anger, expected accusations, maybe even a desperate plea. She received none of it. Grayson, composed yet unreadable, leveled her with a stare so cold it nearly broke through her facade of confidence. The only words he allowed himself were measured, spoken with a quiet intensity that cut through the air like steel. "You'll regret this." He turned on his heel, stepping over the abandoned roses without a second glance. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving behind a room that smelled of champagne, deception, and the ashes of a life he no longer recognized. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Grayson Walsh sat in the dimly lit office of Michael Thorne, his lawyer, surrounded by stacks of legal documents and the low hum of a clock ticking in the background. The weight of the betrayal settled heavily on his shoulders, though outwardly he remained composed. The divorce papers lay before him, a testament to how quickly Lauren had moved to dismantle the life they had built. The financial statements told an even colder story. His retirement savings, meticulously accumulated over decades, had been siphoned away in a calculated maneuver. Michael flipped through the pages with practiced ease, scanning for loopholes, for leverage, for the smallest advantage that could be turned into a weapon. The fraudulent transfer of funds stood out like a glaring red flag. It wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. A case could be made, and Grayson would have a chance to reclaim what was his. The divorce had been filed under irreconcilable differences, an approach designed to keep things clean, swift, and devoid of unnecessary complications. But complications were unavoidable when betrayal ran this deep. Adultery, financial manipulation, and deceit had all played their part, and ignoring those elements would be a mistake. A counterclaim could shift the balance, making it clear that Lauren had orchestrated this downfall, not him. Beyond financial restitution, another opportunity presented itself, one Lauren likely hadn't considered. Her visa, tied directly to their marriage, would no longer hold once the fraud was exposed. The possibility of deportation loomed over her like a storm cloud, an irony too rich to ignore. Legal strategies unfolded like a chessboard in Grayson's mind, each move calculated with ruthless precision. The next steps were obvious: filing for fraud, countering her divorce claim, and ensuring she couldn't walk away with a penny more than she deserved. His resolve hardened. There would be no pleading, no futile attempts at reconciliation. She had made her choice, and now he would make his. Over the following days, Grayson buried himself in his work, channeling every ounce of his frustration into his projects. His focus sharpened, his presence in the office more intense than ever. Colleagues noticed the change. The long hours, the unwavering determination, the way he moved through tasks with a newfound efficiency that left little room for distractions. One evening, while gathering his things to leave, he overheard two junior architects discussing an upcoming international competition. A sustainable city project with a high-profile prize and strict entry requirements. Only teams featuring collaborations between established architects and rising talents from developing nations would qualify. The details stuck with him. A high-stakes challenge, one that demanded innovation, strategy, and the kind of creative thinking that had once defined his career. More than that, it was an opportunity to pivot, to rise beyond the damage Lauren had inflicted and reestablish himself on an even greater scale. That night, instead of heading home, he returned to his desk, digging into the competition guidelines. Research stretched into the early hours of the morning, until exhaustion blurred the words on the screen. Then, buried among countless portfolios, he found what he was looking for. Sofia Mendoza. Her work was unlike anything he had seen, bold, forward-thinking, yet deeply rooted in the architectural traditions of her homeland. It was the perfect balance between past and future, a philosophy that aligned seamlessly with his own vision. She was talented but overlooked by the larger industry. That made her the ideal partner. By noon the next day, a formal proposal had been sent, a direct offer promising collaboration, growth, and the potential for global recognition. The response came within hours. A simple acceptance, concise, professional, but carrying an unmistakable undertone of intrigue. Less than a week after Lauren's betrayal, Grayson was already boarding a flight. The irony was not lost on him. He was headed to the very country she had once called home, not to chase ghosts of the past, but to forge something entirely new. As the engines roared to life, he leaned back in his seat, his thoughts no longer clouded by anger but sharpened by purpose. Let Lauren and Daniel enjoy their stolen wealth. They had no idea what was coming. The humid air pressed against Grayson Walsh's skin the moment he stepped off the plane. The city stretched before him, a chaotic blend of old and new, towering glass structures juxtaposed with historic architecture, streets alive with movement, and the distant hum of construction filling the gaps between conversations. This was unfamiliar territory, yet the weight of his purpose kept him grounded. He hadn't come here for nostalgia or distraction. This was about strategy, about building something that would eclipse the ruins of his past. Sofia Mendoza was waiting near the arrival's gate, her stance poised, professional, yet with a hint of curiosity in her sharp gaze. She appeared younger than expected, perhaps in her early 30s, but experience had etched itself into the way she carried herself. She had the look of someone who had fought for every opportunity, a quality he recognized instantly. The meeting took place in a quiet cafe not far from the airport. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the distant aroma of street food, grounding the moment in something tangible. Sofia wasted little time with pleasantries. Her expression remained unreadable as she skimmed through the project proposal on the tablet before her. Grayson observed her reaction closely, noting the occasional flicker of interest when she reached certain key points: the funding allocation, the design freedom, the international exposure. These were the elements that mattered, not just to her but to both of them. After a moment, she set the tablet aside, folding her hands neatly on the table. There was no need for excessive discussion. The terms were clear. The work would be demanding, the expectations high, but the potential rewards outweighed the risks. Their partnership was formalized with a handshake, firm, steady, unspoken trust forming between two professionals who understood the stakes. Work began immediately. Their rented workspace, an open-concept studio nestled between industrial buildings, became the center of their operation. Blueprints covered the walls, sketches evolved into three-dimensional models, and discussions stretched long into the night. The challenge was monumental, designing a fully self-sustaining urban ecosystem, integrating renewable energy, water conservation, and green infrastructure without compromising aesthetics or functionality. Sofia's expertise in blending modern design with local cultural influences proved invaluable. Where Grayson brought technical precision, she introduced elements of adaptive reuse and material sustainability that gave the project its unique edge. The creative synergy between them was effortless, built on mutual respect and an unrelenting pursuit of perfection. Days blurred together, schedules dictated by deadlines rather than the cycle of sunrise and sunset. The weight of their ambition left little room for personal distractions, which suited Grayson just fine. Still, even as he lost himself in the intricate details of the project, the ghost of his past lurked on the periphery. Back in his home country, Lauren and Daniel were basking in their ill-gotten victory, living lavishly off the money they had stolen. Their confidence in their success was evident. Social media posts dripping with arrogance, public appearances that suggested they had moved on without consequence. They believed Grayson was nothing more than a footnote in their story, a man too broken to retaliate. They were wrong. During rare moments of respite, Grayson meticulously gathered information. Every financial movement, every trace of fraudulent activity, every whisper of potential weakness. They were all documented, carefully pieced together to form the foundation of his counterattack. Legal proceedings were already in motion, the fraud claims building momentum. But there were other ways to dismantle an enemy, ways that required patience rather than brute force. His phone buzzed one evening, the name Michael Thorne flashing across the screen. The news was expected but no less satisfying. The financial recovery process had begun. The stolen retirement funds had been flagged, the transfer under legal scrutiny. The chances of Lauren holding onto them were dwindling by the day. Still, she wouldn't go down without a fight. Grayson knew this because he understood her better than she realized. She wasn't the type to accept consequences. She would try to maneuver, to manipulate, to delay. She had spent years perfecting the art of subtle deceit, but now the walls were closing in. For now, he remained silent. Let her believe she was safe. The real damage would come when she least expected it. Turning his attention back to the blueprints before him, he traced the lines of the proposed urban infrastructure with quiet determination. The competition deadline was closing in, but their project was stronger than ever. Soon, his name would once again be associated with success, not scandal. And when Lauren finally realized the extent of her miscalculation, it would be far too late to undo the damage. This wasn't just about winning. It was about rebuilding stronger, smarter, and with an unshakable foundation. And this time, no one would take from him what he had earned. The momentum of the project carried Grayson Walsh forward, leaving little time for reflection. The competition deadline loomed, but every refinement to their design, every breakthrough in their strategy, reinforced the certainty that they were creating something revolutionary. The concept had evolved beyond a mere sustainable city. It was a vision of the future, an ecosystem where innovation met cultural preservation, where modern technology blended seamlessly with the needs of the environment. The collaboration with Sofia Mendoza had proven invaluable. Her knowledge of adaptive architecture, local materials, and ecological balance gave their design an edge that few competitors could match. Together, they worked with a relentless intensity, pushing past exhaustion, their shared ambition driving them beyond limitations. But beyond the walls of their workspace, a different kind of storm was brewing. Lauren and Daniel were beginning to realize that their victory was slipping through their fingers. The cracks in their carefully constructed narrative had begun to show. Legal proceedings had halted the flow of stolen funds. The lavish lifestyle they had so eagerly flaunted was now under scrutiny. Behind the scenes, Michael Thorne had built an airtight case against them, ensuring that every fraudulent transaction, every misstep, was cataloged and weaponized. Yet, Lauren had never been one to retreat quietly. The first sign of her counterattack came subtly, whispers of concern surrounding Grayson's competition entry. A well-placed rumor suggesting that the structural integrity of his designs was questionable, that the sustainability claims were exaggerated, that the project itself was a risky investment. Investors and officials within the architectural community began hearing murmurs of doubt, subtle but persistent. It didn't take long to trace the source. Lauren had always been skilled in manipulation, and now she was leveraging every connection, every ounce of influence she had to undermine him. The attack wasn't direct. It was designed to erode trust, to place just enough uncertainty in the minds of those who held power over the competition's outcome. Grayson, however, had anticipated this move. Long before the first rumors took shape, he had fortified his position. Every aspect of the project had been meticulously documented. Structural reports, independent safety assessments, third-party verifications. All of it had been compiled, ensuring that when the accusations arose, the truth would dismantle them with brutal efficiency. The opportunity to strike back came sooner than expected. A high-profile industry event brought together key figures, investors, competition judges, city officials. Grayson and Sophia attended, not just as participants but as architects of something undeniable. When the questions came, when subtle concerns were voiced, they met them head-on. The presentation was deliberate. Grayson laid out the foundation of their design with clinical precision, countering each whisper of doubt with concrete evidence. Sophia followed with a compelling argument about cultural integration and sustainable innovation, proving that their vision wasn't just viable, it was necessary. By the end of the evening, the tide had shifted. Those who had wavered now stood firmly behind them. The attempt to sabotage their credibility had not only failed but had solidified their standing as frontrunners in the competition. Lauren's move had backfired spectacularly. But she wasn't finished. Back in his home country, legal proceedings escalated. Lauren's legal team scrambled to counter the fraud charges, but the evidence was overwhelming. The bank transfers, the forged documents, the financial inconsistencies. There was no way out. The funds were being pulled back, assets frozen, and for the first time, Lauren found herself cornered. The pressure weighed on her. The public image she had so carefully crafted was unraveling. And then came the inevitable breaking point. Reports surfaced of tensions between her and Daniel. Their once perfect display of success had begun to fracture under the strain of dwindling resources and legal threats. Whispers of arguments behind closed doors, of growing frustration and mistrust, spread through their social circles. Grayson didn't need to interfere. The consequences of their actions were dismantling them from within. While Lauren scrambled to hold onto the remnants of her stolen empire, Grayson remained focused. The final stretch of the competition was within reach, and every obstacle, every attempt to derail him, had only reinforced his determination. The past was no longer a weight around his neck. It was a lesson, a catalyst. As the final days before the competition drew near, one thing became clear. Lauren had spent so much time trying to destroy him that she had failed to see the inevitable. She had already lost. The final phase of the competition arrived with an air of anticipation, the kind that sent ripples through the architectural world. Judges, investors, and industry leaders had gathered, their eyes set on the groundbreaking projects that would define the future of sustainable urban development. Grayson Walsh stood at the center of it all, his presence commanding but composed. Months of relentless work had led to this moment. The sleepless nights, the exhaustive revisions, the calculated maneuvers. It had all been leading here. Sophia Mendoza, his partner in this venture, shared his quiet confidence. Their design was more than just a concept. It was a statement, a vision crafted from precision, innovation, and resilience. The stage was set. Their presentation unfolded seamlessly, each element of the project meticulously detailed. Every feature was backed by data, by research, by undeniable proof of feasibility. The judges listened intently, nodding in approval as the layers of their design came together: vertical farming structures integrated into residential complexes, renewable energy grids optimized for efficiency, sustainable water management systems built to endure. By the time the final slides were displayed, silence filled the auditorium. Then came the applause, steady at first, then rising to something greater. The weight of the moment settled in. They had done more than impress. They had solidified their dominance in the competition. But the true victory was yet to come. In the background, far removed from the grandeur of the event, Lauren Marshall's world was crumbling. The fraud case had reached its peak. The court had frozen her assets, her lavish lifestyle reduced to an illusion on the brink of collapse. Every financial avenue she had relied upon was shutting down, the money she had so easily stolen now slipping beyond her grasp. And then came the final verdict, a legal ruling that dismantled everything. The fraudulent transfers had been reversed, leaving her in financial ruin. The court declared the marriage annulled on grounds of deception, stripping her of any claim to Grayson's wealth, properties, or business. Her legal team had fought desperately to salvage something, anything, but there was no recourse left. The consequences did not stop there. With her immigration status under investigation, the looming threat of deportation became very real. The walls had closed in, and for the first time there was no way out. Daniel Cruz, the man she had sacrificed everything for, had already begun to distance himself. The once proud display of their new life together had faded, replaced by tension, financial strain, and mounting desperation. When the pressure became unbearable, he did what was inevitable. He left. Without wealth, without security, Lauren had become nothing more than a liability. The betrayal she had once orchestrated had come full circle. Grayson, however, barely spared her a thought. His focus remained on what lay ahead. The competition had concluded, the judges had deliberated, and the final announcement loomed. As the head judge took the stage, an electric current of anticipation swept through the crowd. Then, with careful deliberation, the words were spoken. Grayson Walsh and Sophia Mendoza had won. Applause thundered through the auditorium. Cameras flashed. The weight of the moment settled in, not just as a professional triumph, but as a symbol of something greater. Redemption, closure, the undeniable proof that he had not just survived but thrived. As he accepted the award, shaking hands with dignitaries and industry leaders, he allowed himself a brief glance at the crowd. Somewhere in the distance, Lauren was watching. Whether in person or from afar, she would see this. She would know that she had failed, that everything she had tried to take from him had only made him stronger. The past was over. The battle won. As the evening celebrations unfolded, Sophia raised a glass, a knowing smile playing at her lips. The future stretched before them. New projects, new opportunities. An empire built not on revenge, but on something far greater. Grayson lifted his own glass, the flicker of a rare smile crossing his face. Lauren and Daniel had become nothing more than footnotes in his story. Their downfall had been inevitable, but it was no longer his concern. He had his victory, not in court, not in wealth, but in the undeniable fact that he had rebuilt his life from the ashes. And this time, no one could take it from him.